this actually was a good sort of segue because it was kind of a pivot towards domestic. I'll just ask just a global sort of domestic question. You know, the economy of Massachusetts is actually pretty good relative to the rest of the country. It obviously can be better. The whole country there has been in a tough economic situation for the last couple of years. What do the parties offer, what do the candidates offer on trying to get the economy in a better place than it is today? And we'll start this one with the Republicans and we'll go to the Democrats and we'll dialogue a little bit, Jim Lair's style.
This is where everybody talks about gridlock. And it's very important that people understand where each party stands on this issue. Because somebody is right and somebody is wrong. It's going to come down to that. When you talk about creating jobs, you have a political mindset, or it's maybe an economic philosophy that's Keynesian in nature. If you don't know what Keynesian economics is, it's basically the government spending is what stimulates economic growth. And it's failed from the outset. It's flawed in its inherent design. And the unfortunate reality is when you have elected officials, whether it be the president, whether it be Professor Warren, who subscribe to this philosophy, it wastes billions and billions of dollars. The true economic engine of any economy, and we're not unique here in America, if it were tried anywhere else, it would do the exact same thing, is to let entrepreneurs start businesses and create things that they either dig up from the ground or grow or turn into something useful for humanity. That is how economic growth happens. The government's role in that process is to protect its citizens. And this is where we diverge as two political parties, because when you're in Congress and somebody says we need a stimulus plan building bridges and roads, and somebody says no, that's not how economic growth is created, there's not much wiggle room. Somebody's right, somebody's wrong. And the people who are in the business sector, in the private sector, like myself and Governor Romney, do actually understand that government doesn't create jobs. And you heard it from Elizabeth Warren in their last Senate debate, where she said very, very clearly that government spending, student at UMass will asked her the question, how do they create jobs? And she said the government needs to spend more and get that money out in the economy. But the logical, some Republicans got to tear their hair out sometimes because they look at that and say, well, where does the government get its money? It gets its money from productive people in the private sector. So you're just recycling money instead of actually creating new sustainable jobs. And this is where, if you're interested in a robust career in the private sector, vote Republican.
Russ, you want to add something to that?
No, I did great.
Russ, okay, John and Tina.
I actually have, I'd say probably 2 points on this. One, you mentioned that the role of the government in the economy is to protect our citizens. And I do think that that's one of the places that we diverge the most as two parties, in that we are interested in protecting our citizens. We are interested in protecting them from too much deregulation and corporations that can essentially do anything they like, as in sending U.S. manufacturing jobs and U.S. telecommunications jobs abroad. That is something that the Democrats would like to stop. We would like to see our citizens paid a living wage. We would like to see people treated fairly by their employers, whether it's health care or family time, or not being discriminated against in the workplace simply because of their gender or sexual orientation. I think that those are things that protect our citizens within the economy, and I think that those are things that help to grow an economy, because if we have more people working here as opposed to overseas, we have more people spending money here as opposed to overseas. I also, the job stimulus, my parents recently moved to South Carolina about 5 years ago. My father is a day laborer. He's not very well educated, but he's incredibly good at construction. Was a foreman before, he works with his hands his whole life. In South Carolina, where essentially on the coast, all there is construction jobs. And even as a day laborer, where he goes into the temp agency and they give him his 10 hours worth of work, and every day it's somewhere different. In the last 5 years, most of the work that he's gotten has been through the Recovery Act. And this is an economy in coastal South Carolina that can't get enough building, that can't get enough, private investment. They need to expand beyond Little Beach at this point because of it. And yet, the jobs that are there, and the jobs that are available, and the jobs that are being done are through the stimulus. And I think it's an interesting example of how the stimulus package really is making a difference and really is buoying the local economy in particular.
John?
It's interesting that you say roads and bridges don't create jobs. I'd be curious to know who's building those roads and bridges, if it isn't people that are working jobs and making a salary. I think here's point number 2, where Republicans and Democrats are going to agree tonight, so mark this down. We both agree that the private sector and the job growth in the private sector is the most important thing, and it's how we're going to grow this economy moving forward. And I think President Obama has done a good job of providing tax cuts not only to middle class and working families, but also to small businesses to get them to try to hire more people and create more jobs. And I think long term, you can't sustain the economy on government workers. We both agree on that. There has to be a certain level of government people working in the government to provide for safety, police, fire, teachers, that sort of thing, public works. So, I think, going back to the stimulus, 60% of it was tax cuts. We talk about this giant number from the stimulus, that the government spent all this money, but the reality is that the majority of it was tax cuts for middle-class families and working families and for businesses. And, the other 40% was stimulus that we actually did some spending. And when that stimulus money ran out, we've seen over the past couple of quarters now that, growth has slowed down. And you look at other countries, and I know America's the greatest country on earth, but I think we can, and I don't say that, I'm not joking on that, I believe that truly, but I think we can also, having that belief, also look to other countries as examples of how things work. UK last year started, major, and this is across Europe, major austerity, and they have seen their economies completely come to a halt. So, we talk about stimulus as if it was this really bad thing, but, the economy actually started moving again because the government is, when nobody else is going to spend money, somebody has to get money out into the economy, and it's going to be the government.
Jeff, what's your response? Yeah, sure.
I'm always fascinated, not necessarily with the Democratic argument, but always what is left out at the end. And there's quite a few things there. Now, the idea that too much deregulation will push jobs overseas is absurd. And you don't have to look very far to see all the companies that are leaving Massachusetts and going to New Hampshire. It's 30, 40 miles away, and they're fleeing here. Fidelity laid off how many people last week or something? 4,000, 5,000? They're moving it away. Now, people don't just, in the business community, don't wake up and decide, oh, I don't like Massachusetts anymore, see you later. They go because of reasons. They go because of regulation, higher taxes, healthcare, all of these things that businesses are getting, to quote our vice president, buried by lately. And that's too much deregulation. We don't have enough deregulation right now. If we had actual deregulation, you'd start to see jobs coming back here. If we had a lower corporate tax rate, you'd start to see jobs coming over here. The second thing you mentioned, UK austerity. What the UK did was they cut government spending, but then they raised taxes. They raised taxes. Do you know if you're a wealthy individual, you now have to pay well over 50% of your income in the UK. They made jokes about it. If you catch some of the like Ricky Gervais and stuff, he's a wealthy British citizen, so he has to pay quite a bit in taxes. The government, when it takes more money out of the private sector, whether it's America, whether it's Europe, it does not matter. When the government takes more money out of the private sector, it slows things down, period. And you're going to see, with hopefully a Romney presidency, all that cash start to get freed up. Now, right now, I just was showing some folks before this discussion, the amount of excess reserves that the Federal Reserve has on hand from all the banks. There's a flat line for about 40 years, and then in 2010 it just shoots up. That's because of the quantitative easing and the printing of money that the Federal Reserve is in. That's another discussion. But I'm glad the folks are up here defending their point, because these are two divergent opinions, and that directly affect everybody in this room, everybody walking by on the street, everybody in America. There's one way or the other. Somebody's right and somebody's wrong. And the fact is, I'll close with this, I don't want to take up too much time, but there's a great historical example that you can go by, and there's thousands of others, but a good one is the Brooklyn Bridge. Okay, shortly after the Civil War, there was an influx of immigrants to Lower Manhattan and Brooklyn, and they take ferry boats back and forth to and from their job, from their homes. So eventually more and more immigrants kept coming in, and it became this titan of industry in America, and the East River was clogged with ferry boats. So one day they decided to build a bridge to ease the traffic of the ferry boats. Now, there was an economic need to build the bridge. They didn't just randomly decide to build the bridge and then hope and cross their fingers that people showed up to build factories on one side and homes on the other. There's an economic need. That's the proper role of government, to build a bridge, to build a road, to build a school, where it's needed when the economic need is there. Not the other way around, because you would have had massive corruption, kickbacks, which I'm sure happened, Boss Tweed and all those folks. But what you have when you try to do stimulus is people who funded campaigns get $1 million, $1 billion loans and grants, and it becomes ripe with corruption. So there's two choices, and they are divergent. There's the private sector creates jobs,